Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the session right after lunch, sticking around. Today, we're going to be talking about recruiting, retaining, and empowering women in the profession. This session will focus on the challenges women face in the workplace. Discussion will also touch on the intersections of women in leadership, including the unique challenges of women of color. This session will explore the steps women can take to become CAO if they so choose to be. We will discuss the ways in which the profession must adapt to recruit, retain women in local government. We will also learn how to foster the next generation of women leaders. My name is Rebecca Flora. I'm with Lee County Parks and Recreation Department. I would like to introduce our speakers today. I'll start with Gillian Barth. She has been the Director of People and Culture at the town of Palm Beach for almost 2 years. She came to local government after working in the international humanitarian aid sector for over 30 years with CARE International, an organization whose mission is to combat the underlying causes of poverty in over 90 countries through gender equality and with a focus on women and girls as primary agents in lifting themselves and their communities out of poverty. She brings the passion to her work in government by maintaining her belief that team balance is essential and attracting and retaining outstanding women is a key component for success. Next, we have Treasa Brown Stubbs. She is currently the city manager for the city of Lauderdale Lakes and most previously served as the assistant county manager and director of the Department of Parks and Human Services, where she has gathered almost 2 decades of public service experience. Treasa holds a bachelor's degree from Florida A&M University and a master's degree in public administration from Nova Southeastern University. She has also completed several noteworthy certification programs through ICMA. She holds memberships and serves on committees in several organizations, such as the Florida City and County Management Association, Broward County City Managers Association, and the National Forum for Black Public Administrators, the National Recreation and Parks Association, and the Area Agency on Aging Government Relations Committee. Laura Savage is a senior program manager focused on career and equity advancement at ICMA. She cultivates relationships with local government professionals and supports executive board priorities, in addition to managing ICMA's #SheLeadsGov initiative, supporting the Assistant Chief Administrative Officer Committee, and liaisoning with local government equity affiliates. Prior to her work at ICMA, Laura served as district clerk, assistant to the district manager, and in other roles spanning 15 years at Pueblo West Metropolitan District, a unique special district of 33,000 residents located in southern Colorado. She has a Bachelor of Science in Computer Information Systems from CSU Pueblo, a graduate certificate in Business Administration from the University of Kansas, and a Master of Public Administration from CU Denver. Heidi Voorhees has more than 35 years experience in executive recruitment, general management consulting, and local government administration, and is the co-owner and president of GovHR USA and GovTemps USA, a temporary staffing business. Ms. Voorhees spent 19 years in local government, including 10 years at the Wilmette, Illinois Village Manager. Ms. Voorhees is founding member of the Legacy Project, an organization in Illinois dedicated to the advancement of women in local government. In 2015, she co-authored Women Leading Government, Why So Little Progress in 30 Years for the International City and County Management Association's Public Management magazine. All right, so with that, we'll begin. Janetta will come up and go from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to our session, Recruiting, Retaining, and Empowering Women in the Profession. So this is an amazing opportunity to collaborate with these amazing women here on this panel. again, we are going to discuss the challenges that women face in the workplace. We're going to learn strategies to better recruit and retain talent, and hopefully leave with tangible ways to foster the next generation. And at this moment, we are going to enter into our snowball challenge. So it's a little bit different. Now you have notepads and pens at your table. And so we ask for you to get a piece of paper and a pen. And so on your paper, we would like for you to please write down your name, how you feel today, what you would like to learn, and one word that best describes you. Gotcha? Please write down your name, how you feel today, what you would like to learn, and one word that best describes you. After you get done writing this, please share with your table. So at this time, you're going to ball your piece of paper up, not too tightly, but just enough. And you are going to toss it or throw it across the room so that someone else, now keep in mind, someone else has to pick it up later. So throw it across the room.
Hey. Everybody.
Hey.
Our girl was not really good. That's your line of That's a pretty good throw.
To see if she can read my writing.
I actually kind of like that. It's a cute idea.
Yeah.
It's a cute idea. I'm gonna remember that. To self that one.
Right? So you may pick up someone else's snowball. Make sure you don't have your own snowball. Okay. And so now we're going to do a little whole group share. So if you're feeling confident, come up to the mic and let us know what your snowball or your paper reads.
So I've got someone who says they feel swollen. So in deference to the person, I don't know if they'd like me to share their name, but they'd like to learn how to advance, make better and tangible takeaways versus more cheerleading. So it's probably better initiatives and what to do instead of just cheerleading. And they describe themselves as tenacious. And the person can determine if they'd like me to share their name. I don't know if there's a story behind being swollen or not. Okay. All right, so it's Emily Cologne who says she's pregnant.
Anyone else? And you can stand where you are.
All right. Well, I'm swollen, I'm not gonna walk. And I got Miss Beth Rollins, who is tired. She's looking for a swift path forward to equal opportunity for all. And she's also tenacious, which I love that. My soul sister.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
She feels great. It's terrible handwriting. Dedicated. Find ways to practice things, willing to keep administrative office.
Yes. And we have two more.
I have Heidi, who is energized and excited, and she wants to learn how to get out of here. And we started.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I have Peggy, who feels grateful and ready to absorb and learn from those around me as well as share my experience with others. She would like to learn how to continue to empower and encourage those around her to achieve productivity and describe herself as creative.
Yes. Very nice. All right. So mentorship. I always come across these two words, coach, mentor. Which do I need? And I always thought that a coach was someone that helps you in your career, maybe helps you make the next steps. But a mentor, I believe, goes a little bit above and beyond. There are someone who can help you in both your personal and professional life, because our personal life definitely affects how we are at work. So having a mentor in your life, in this profession, is very important. So my question to our panel, from right to left, if we can, who are your mentors and why do you believe mentorship is important?
So first, again, thank you for coming to the session today, especially after eating that great dessert and meal, and congratulations to all the award recipients. It's been a fantastic time. And so mentors, it's, after reflecting over this question for a few weeks, I just really want to say that the mentors in my life who have been true mentors are those who have just kind of landed onto my lap and have appeared out of the woodwork, and it just like completely unexpected. And I go back to my very first job as a cashier for a sporting goods store. I learned so much from my manager back then, a woman who, was a completely different culture than myself. And just, wow, her work ethic just really inspired me to not think of my job as just a job. I really felt that it was a path to a career, and I wanted to be just like her when I became a manager. And I just still to this day consider her one of my greatest mentors. And another is a gentleman, and this is kind of funny, but a former city manager, a Korean War conflict veteran with white hair, cowboy boots, and a toothpick in his mouth all the time. And he just would always tell me, don't sweat the small stuff, kid. Don't let them get you down, kid. Tomorrow's a new day, kid. And, if they would have let him wear his spurs into the, council chambers, he would have. But again, just that wisdom and having someone to really promote a career in life and be encouraging. So those two people were really who I consider my mentors. And again, mentorship is just so important to really find those gaps in your soul, and they really kind of exploit it and say those little words of wisdom that you don't even know you need to hear. And so, yeah, for me, those are my mentors, and that's why I feel mentorship is just so important.
That's great. My mentor would have to be a former ICMA president. He's now 92. His name is Stan Kennedy. And he hired me to be his assistant village manager when I was 27 years old. And then I succeeded him as village manager when I was 31, which the reason I was able to succeed him is he prepared me for the job. He gave me very real responsibility, complete responsibility for the budget, complete responsibility for the council members that he didn't want to interact with, but it still built those skill sets, complete responsibility for projects. And that helped me grow. He also made sure I came to every ICMA conference, and he introduced me to everyone. And he has, as a former president, knew everyone. He folded me in to all of, I'd be, you would think sometimes, he'd want to stay with his friends. No, he would invite me into these meetings and these groups. And years later, when I was a manager, there was a group of managers that met monthly with a psychiatrist. It got kind of newsy at one point, and I would have been the first woman in the group. And it took them a year to decide if they were up for having a woman in their group. And at one point I was talking to him and I said, I'm just going to give it up. I don't want to be a part of a group that doesn't want me. And he just looked at me, and all of these people were his friends. He said, you belong there, so don't give up. And so he's always been in my corner and had that, and I felt had my back. when I was ready to give up, and very important to me.
All right, so I've been with the City of Lauderdale Lakes for about 20 years. So I've been through about 5 city managers, I believe, but I guess you could say I've had them all as mentors in one way or the other. So I've learned from them each. They just started giving me work upon work upon work over the years. So I'm thankful for that. My last city manager, similar to Heidi, took me everywhere, took me to the ICMA conferences or shunned me along so I could go on my own. Took me to local BCCMA meetings. I'm like, another meeting? I gotta go. Are you serious? But it was great. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people, and I'm just so thankful that he took me under his wing. And I also see mentorship as belonging to organizations or groups. I think you can have a group mentorship opportunity. ICMA, BCCMA, NFBPA. I've been members of those various organizations over the years. I've learned so much. I've met countless number of people that I can just call and bounce ideas off of. So I think just belonging to those groups and having individuals within those groups as mentors is very important.
So from my perspective, mentorship is something I think traditionally we tend to think is somebody up there, whereas opposed we are here. And I think there's no question in my career, I've had people who I would either report to directly or indirectly, who I would consider mentors. Someone who was a former CEO of a previous organization, he was my worst boss and he was my best boss for lots of those same reasons. But I tend to think of mentorship a little bit differently. It's just because the way my brain works. And maybe it's just working all those years in people and culture that I have listening ears on 24/7. And I take a lot of time to listen to employees all the time. And I find some of my best mentors, interestingly enough, have been employees who are, as far as the ladder goes, far lower on the rungs, if you want to use those terminologies, than I am. But just sitting and listening to them, I have learned so much about so many different things that I wouldn't have otherwise learned from somebody who I was reporting to. So I think mentors are sort of a 360 type of thing. You can learn from everybody. And then I'm a voracious reader, and some of my best mentors, I would also say, are authors. So I think it's really important to think of mentors outside of the usual definition of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And so I want to talk about a resource that ICMA has, and it's called ICMA Coach Connect. And I have most certainly used it. I've actually reached out to Heidi Voorhees on Coach Connect. I've reached out to Emily Cologne on Coach Connect. And it's, again, a really good resource. So, Laura, could you talk a little bit more about Coach Connect?
Absolutely. Yeah. Coach Connect on ICMA is a free resource for anyone, whether you are a local government professional who is an ICMA member, if you're beginning your career, really, the possibilities are endless for you. You get 10 free sessions, and if you go through all those, let me know. I will happily refill your account for that. But I do want to point out that there are 260 coaches as of today. 50 of them are under the women and local government topic. And so altogether, there are 18 conversation topics, which range, again, from women in local government to LGBTQIA+, to anything about strategic development and anything. And then there are also 12 areas of expertise. And so I just highly encourage everyone in this room, if anything, close your eyes, pick a coach, and just roll with it. Just kind of like we've all said this morning, coaches come in from unexpected places. And once you go from coach, then it's so easy to go to mentor and mentee. So again, use all your credits, reach out to me if you need some more.
Right. So women have unique challenges in the workplace. Of course, there's work-life balance, and working in local government, what is that? There's bias. There's lack of networking and lack of mentorship. So I would like to pose a question to our Panel, what do you believe is the biggest challenge that women currently face in the workplace?
I think we're underestimated, underpaid, underrepresented, right?
Underappreciated.
Underappreciated, all the unders, which is unfortunate. It's an ongoing cycle. And I think that we have to do our part as women and just make ourselves heard, known. How does it go, Jeanette? If you don't have a seat at the table, then bring a lawn chair.
Exactly.
Was that Shirley?
Shirley. Yep.
So we have to make our own ways sometimes. I was raised by a single mom, along with my grandmother, strong women. So they did not take no for an answer. And so they taught me to be the same way. They were my grandmother was my biggest cheerleader. And I always sort of wondered why. But I think even she knew with her 6th grade education that it was always going to be a push, right? So don't allow yourself to be under, period. So we have to continue to fight, continue to move forward, and shut down those biases, knock down those doors.
And if I can also weigh in the article that Sarah Hannah Spurlock and Jill Silverboard wrote in 2021, Marquita Oliver talks about the division of domestic labor. And I think that that's a huge issue for women. It is still, I think, an unfortunate fact that women have the majority of the caregiving responsibilities. And so if you're not married and you're thinking about getting married, I think that's a very important conversation to have with your future partner, to talk in very real terms about that, because I think that sometimes gets missed in the conversation. And we saw during the pandemic, millions of women dropped out of the workforce because there was no childcare and kids were being home, they would go on Zoom for school. So we've seen the real impact of what that means. And if we don't have some kind of equity at home, it's going to be very difficult to balance the demands of work and home life. And so I think we have to, that's one very important thing that I think we have to look at. And the other thing that happens is a lot of times women drop out of the workforce for 5 years, 10 years, sometimes even longer. And my cautionary tale about that, as someone I'm now almost 65 years old, I have a number of friends who dropped out for 10, 15, or 20 years and then dealt with a spouse who lost their job, a divorce, a death. Nobody wants to think any of these things are going to happen to our spouses or in our life, but then they had to get back into the workforce. And it was very, very difficult. And they, of course, were very underemployed. And so my advice is, if you do take time off, keep your hand in, do some project work, do some part-time work, so that you are always able to step up if taking care of your family or yourself falls to you.
I'll take a stab at that as well. And I'll focus my answer on why do you think it's biggest challenge for women in local government. And the reason that I want to do that is because I find in local government, which is very different from the background that I had previously, they all tend to be fairly male-dominated roles, whether it's police, whether it's fire, whether it's public works, planning, zoning, and building, somewhat. All of those are very heavily male-dominated roles. And that being the case, what happens is you're creating a culture in an organization that tends to be male-dominated. And every time you want to do something a little bit different, there's this sort of temptation to fall back on the male culture in the town. And that's why I think you need to be far, far more imaginative, creative, and setting goals in terms of how you may want to turn this around. And we'll get through a lot of this when we get into recruitment and retention and that type of thing. But I think the biggest challenge that women face in local government is being able to be equals in a fairly male-dominated sector.
Thank you so much. So a few years ago, ICMA conducted an assessment of where women were as chief administrative officers. And Florida was very unique. And there were 231 chief administrative officers, that is city and county managers. And out of those 231, only 52 were women. and that represents about 22.5%. So my question is, why do you believe there are so few women CAOs, city managers, county managers, in Florida? Love to write this on. And that's if you want to speak on it.
I guess that's me. Okay, so earlier I said that I've been through 4 or 5 managers, I forget. So I'm the second female in the last 20 years within my organization to be in a city manager's role. So my path to get there started in the recreation field as a part-time person. I was just given assignments after assignments. I gravitated to the role and I continued on that path. I just took on the challenging assignments on whether it's from the city manager or from the elected officials at time. I became that go-to person naturally. I made a lot of things look easy on the outside, but on the inside, research, I'm gathering information, I'm calling people, but I just made it happen. And honestly, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to know the community. So it was just a joyous time for me climbing the ladder. Most recently, we lost our city manager. So that was, I can't even call it bittersweet. It was bitter. A couple of years, he just went through a cancer scare. But along those lines, I promised him that I would have his back. I'd be there for him. I wasn't going anywhere. So not by title, but I was the acting city manager for really a couple of years. And no disrespect to him at all. As long as he was able to make those tough decisions, he did. But I would tell our staff, just leave him alone. It's good. We got it. Let's keep moving forward. But that was the best learning experience for me to sort of take on that role as caretaker of the organization, and also making sure that he was able to, be peaceful without all of the background issues. So even though I was able to be there for him in that moment, as well as our great team, it was an experience for me as a excellent learning tool that I never wanted to take on. I did not necessarily aspire to be a city manager. It just fell into my lap, like literally, because I had to do it. And I was on the cuff for a while. Same struggles. Oh, do I do it? What about my 9-year-old daughter that has me wrapped around her little finger? My son is in college. Yeah, do the math. That's a 10-year span. What do I do? If he needs me, can I just get up and go? And lo and behold, the same month that Phil passed away, we were literally at his memorial service, and I got a call from my son's school, and he was sick. And I had to come up here to UCF the day after Phil's memorial service. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I know I can't do this. But when I came up here to take care of him, that was my awakening moment, because I was at the hospital with my son. I was on a conference call with the elected body, and of course, talking to the executive staff all at the same time. So I had a reckoning with myself. I'm like, I just did it, and I was able to juggle everything in that moment. I'm like, well, if I can do it now at this urgent moment in my life personally, surely I could do it. And I owed it to my staff, I thought, and still think to do so. They just went through a challenging time of losing our city manager. I could not live with the fact of I cannot take them through another loss, which would have been losing me. Not that I'm all of that, but I am. But I didn't want them to go through another loss. So it was just, I thought it was my duty to continue in Phil's legacy also, to just, take the bull by the horn and keep moving forward. That's my path.
Wow. Thank you. That was inspiring, Treasa. Thank you for sharing your story. And so, nationally is actually a bit low. I think there's something called the 16 or the 2016 project. That number is 16% nationally.
Yeah. It's gotten a little better over the last few years, because in 2015, I think it was 13%. And in Illinois, we've gone up. We were at 7, and I think we're close to 30 or 25. But yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I'd say it's about 20% right now.
That was my guess too.
Yeah, every state's a little different. And I'm actually really happy to see this statistic for Florida. It's really, really good. You know, there are some states, number one, that don't even have chief administrative officer, right? The form of government is not council manager. And so that's already kind of going against us, because running as an elected official and even being elected is a whole nother ballgame. But then, you know, speaking of elected officials, they're the ones that ultimately offer a contract to the women who apply and go through, you know, the day or 2 day long process of that whole, it's like a whole show, right? Entertainment. And so really, I mean, that's one point I would like to make too, is, you know, your elected body and their perceived, you know, the biases that they have on saying, well, you know, she's got a 9-year-old, like she's never going to have time, or she won't be available, or she does parent care, right? She has, takes care after her mom who's had a stroke, or like, you know, she's always going to be at doctor's appointments, or, oh, she's expecting, she's not going to have time, you know, she'll be up all night. Can't bring a baby to a board meeting, you know, like, so that, you know, why are there so few women in general? That's a huge chunk of that equation.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, we see that bias at the elected official level, but I think we have to counter it by making sure that we're moving women forward who are qualified and have the same, you know, they have the passion and they've had the experiences and they've gotten them. And we can, you know, as a recruiter, we can move them forward and keep bringing the council back to that, you know, to that point, you know, that you have this person who's very well qualified, and really kind of hold their feet to the fire about why they don't want to hire that person. But, you know, Laura's absolutely right. Those things go on. I've seen it. It's not pretty when, and I actually had a council one day, and sometimes people still do this, where they say they're trying to decide between which of the 2 women to interview. They've already picked the 4 men. And I finally just said, you know, you can interview both of them. It was like a light bulb went off. Oh, okay. And I think that I think the other piece of it is that managers tell a lot of war stories. We're very good at that, and talking about how awful the council is and how hard the job is. We don't make it seem very appealing to people to want to have the top job. And I think we have to also talk about the good things, because if you really want to change the culture of an organization, you need to be in the top job if you want to have that authority and that power. And you also have a lot of control over your schedule. It's not ultimate control for sure. There's places you have to be, but you can delegate, and you can, and I did this when I became a manager. I had a 1-year-old daughter. Everyone said to me, they're not going to hire you. You have a 1-year-old daughter. My closest friends said that, but I hung in there, and they did. And my son was born while I was a manager. And because you don't travel anywhere as a manager. You often live close to home if you have a residency requirement. So there are some things that can work, and it's a family friendly job. You got to go to the festivals, bring your kids. My kids grew up going to parades, festivals, projects. So I think there are a lot of things that we don't talk about. And the last thing I'll say is, I told you about my mentor, all of his age group, so he's 90, they all left work to go pick up their kid from school, to go take their kid to school, to go to the doctor appointment. They just didn't talk about it. They just did it. And they all did it. So this is not something new. It's something that's been going on for a long time. But we just have to, women have to feel empowered to make those same scheduling pieces that men have always done who've been in that role.
I think, sorry.
Are what? Oh, childless. Mm-hmm.
Always been in my heart. But to my male counterparts, who all have families, so there.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
how we eliminate the bias of motherhood around being a CAO of any profession is really important.
Mhm.
As we move forward. I would love to see what those numbers are now.
Right.
Those 60% is
And
Yeah,
I
I would-
won't sugarcoat it and say I didn't have guilt at times, because my kids were absolutely my priority as well. But I think you have guilt no matter what you do as a parent.
Mhm.
So it just goes with the territory. But I can tell you with, the advantage of a 30-year-old and 34-year-old child that they look back and for them, it was a positive experience because I was still around a lot. I wasn't, but my life really was work and family. I mean, there wasn't a lot of extracurricular things. So that's kind of what fell off, leave it up.
Yeah,
Guilt
I was
is
going to
Gillian.
mention also, I think it's partly positioning. What Treasa was saying is she was in the right place at the right time when it fell into her lap. She got there through hard work
Right.
to get into the role that she was. Make no mistake about that. But the thing that I find with local government in particular is, and it's a good thing, there's a lot of career pathing. There's a lot of succession planning. But when you have an environment that is kind of systemic with bias towards men in leadership positions, the natural progression from that is to move into a city manager position. So one of the keys is to make sure that you have those super capable females in those positions like Treasa was, to be able to then take those things on as well.
Thank you so much. So I want to talk a little bit about retention, recruitment, and how do we continue to hire the next generation? Because in recent years, we've seen several different trends, including the Great Resignation and the Silver Tsunami. My predecessor retired, and I was asked to step into her role. And we talk a lot, especially at the city of Fort Lauderdale, about a loss of institutional knowledge. And so I think if we were better able to recruit and retain the talent that we have, then we would see less of that institutional knowledge loss. So I pose this question first to Heidi. What can we do to better recruit women in local government?
Well, I think we have to look. I always tell people when we're recruiting the local government, we have to look at our culture, and our culture has to line up with us being an employer of choice. And we have to have a positive culture that values employees, values their opinions, invests in their professional development, and offers a fair compensation. But I think that culture of learning will attract you employees of all backgrounds. Specifically, the generation coming up and millennials, they want responsibility. They want to be engaged. And frankly, so did the boomers. We just don't act like it now. We act like that's a new thing to us. That's exactly where we were. And we wanted real responsibility and real decision-making authority, real engagement as employees. And I think that's something we owe to all of our employees. So I think that's one way that we're going to attract and retain excellent employees at all levels of the organization. With respect to women and men, because both genders want to have reasonable family-friendly options, and to know that if there's a crisis on the home front, that their boss is going to have their back, and when you do that as a supervisor, you gain so much loyalty. Whether it's somebody caring for a parent or having to leave for a child, you get that back exponentially in loyalty from that employee. So providing that, that total understanding of your employee, and the horror stories I've heard as I've traveled around the country on how employees are treated when they need emergency time off. Great employees have been there 8, 10, 12 years. And, HR tells them, well, if you're not back in 3 days, you'll be fired. That's just unbelievable. But her boss, the woman's boss, came to her rescue because she was dealing with parental issues. So I think that's one thing. The other piece of it is looking internally. I always say in a perfect world, you wouldn't need me, a recruiter, because you'd be looking within your organization for who you can develop and promote. Mm-hmm. And this has been going on for decades by city managers. They look through the organization and they say, that person's got what it takes, and they pluck them out of the organization and they bring them into the manager's office. We just have to expand that to include women and people of color, because typically, it's been white males that have benefited from that. But we have seen that over and over again. I love to use the city manager of Dubuque, Iowa, as an example. He's a great friend, Mike Van Milligan. He was a police sergeant. The city manager recognized his skills and abilities, pulled him into the manager's office. He eventually became the assistant village manager, and then, of course, went on to he's been a great leader in local government through ICMA. But there's example after example after example of that. So we need to look at who we have in our organizations. And we also have to be, to Treasa's situation, open to other forms of leadership in getting into local government. If you were at the speed coaching event, you heard all kinds of different stories about how people came to local government, public safety, from the utility industry. So let's be open to the skills and abilities that they bring, and not just everyone who's been management analyst, assistant. There's lots of paths of leadership and entry, and we have to open up our minds and think creatively about those individuals and what they might do for our organization.
Excellent. So our next question, what can we do to retain women in local government? Gillian, do you think you can answer for us?
Sure, I can kick it off anyway. And before doing so, I would say all of these things are really pertain to everybody. It's not something that's specific female oriented. However, in their absence, if you're recruiting for women, it's more noticeable. Like women are less likely to be drawn to you if you don't have them. So what Heidi was talking about earlier, flexibility in your working environment is one of the most important things for females these days. Not only because they are more often than not not the head of their family so much, but sometimes head of their family for sure, but also the chief caregiver in their home. So the flexibility is important, but it's also meaning it. It's not just saying it and then rolling your eyes when somebody has to take some time off. The work-life balance, of course, is important. And that's a really good thing, because when I was coming up through the ranks many years ago, I was off traveling when my son was 4 months old for 3-4 weeks at a time. And it was really, really hard, because in those days, there just was no expectation that you would do anything other than work. So now I think society has moved to the point where they recognize that there can and should be work-life balance. And local government is actually extraordinarily good for that in most cases. But promoting that, not just as saying we have work-life balance, but demonstrating it, showing it. Because as Heidi referenced earlier, culture is everything. And attracting people is through your culture. If your employees know it and have it and like it, they will promote it. They'll be your recruiters for you. So the work-life balance is important. Investing in reskilling and professional development, there's no question that's a huge thing, because women these days, they want to be able to move, but it does sometimes take investment in higher education learning or other training facilities. Female-friendly policies are an absolute must, whether it is having gender-neutral parental leave. And the gender-neutral is really, really important, because if you just have maternity leave, then there's this expectation that, okay, it's the woman who's going to be taking the time off. And then it puts more pressure on the woman to be able to have to take that time off, and then potentially losing some traction in her career. If you have a parental leave, it puts equal responsibility on both parties. Or in the case of same-sex couples, the same type of thing. Paid family leave is a big one. Breast pumping is something that's become more noticeable as of late. And believe it or not, there are cities out there whose women in police have one foot on their bench with their back turned in the locker room trying to pump their milk. They don't have a place that they can go to. You have women in fire who need to step down for 20 minutes to do their pumping, and it's broadcast all the way across the town. Oh, so-and-so is stepping down, and everybody wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know what she's doing. So those types of things, enforcing those policies in a very sensitive way, are extremely important. Making the right leadership decisions. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier. If you don't have the right leaders in place, and it doesn't have to be all female leaders, but if you don't have leaders in place that are espousing more leadership styles that are more conducive to building a strong culture, that is going to be a problem for retaining women. And just creating a culture that values and uplifts women, which is not always an easy thing to do in local government when sometimes the majority of your employees are either in public safety, public works, or the more male-dominated fields. Ensuring that women can influence the work culture. I was at the emotional intelligence session this morning, and back in the day, that would have been an HR training that everybody would have rolled their eyes at and not really wanted to attend it and saying it was fluff. I mean, I was really, really, really pleased to see the gender balance in that room with everybody watching that training, because people these days recognize that that is really important. So those types of things, again, pay equity, we think it's a no-brainer. It's been a no-brainer for decades, but sometimes you still see pay inequity. Finally, I would say a gender audit. Many years ago in the organization that I was with, our role was to combat underlying causes of poverty through gender equality. We did an audit on our own headquarters. This was 10, 12 years ago. And to my surprise, we did not fare very well. Even in our head office with a mission and vision that we were supposed to be espousing global around the world, we did not do terribly well. So when in doubt, I would say take the time to do a gender audit in your department, because some of the things that come out of it, while they may be shocking and while they may make some people feel really uncomfortable, are really the kind of the key to help you moving forward in the whole vision of gender equality. So those are the primary things. The other thing that I would mention also is amenities, like amenity benefits are something that are really, really important. Not necessarily things that have to form part of your budget, but things like tickets at work, it's now called Working Advantage. All of those things that you can get for your employees that will allow them, females in particular, to be able to invest in their own families is something that's really, really important. So those are kind of the top ones that I have. Others may have others that they want to share.
Thank you so much. So there are younger women in the audience. There are people who want to get their foot in the door. There are students. There are recent graduates. So what can we do to continue to attract millennial and Gen Z women in local government? And I pose this to our entire panel.
Yeah.
I'll take a stab. I think we have to make our organizations look cool, hip, get on social media. I'm looking at Peggy, my PIO and assistant city manager. She knows that's not my thing, but she can take it because she gets cool slang terms from her kids. But that is not me, but I find that strength in others to represent us as the new cool people on the block. They love it. I've also visited a few career days at all levels, so start young. I met a young lady the other day at my daughter's school, but the young lady was my tour guide at the school. She was in 5th grade. I asked her what she wanted to be. Young African-American girl. She said she wanted to be the president. I was like, okay, well, let me mentor you on the spot. So I told her about public administration and my path, and I asked her mom, we exchanged numbers. Her mom was a teacher there. So find them at all levels and start early, whether it's in elementary school, high school, college. I'm on BCCMA. We do our scholarships to our college kids, and we take the opportunity to mentor them as well on the spot. So I think you start early, get them energized about the organization, speak their language a bit, and just make our organizations more attractive for those generations. So you're on the spot.
Yeah. So,
And that's part of
No.
there was time. There was time for questions
That's not how we work.
at the end.
But we're gonna call on you first.
I do just want to point out that this week, McKinsey and Company, if you haven't heard of them, they do a lot of reporting about women in the public sector. They just published an article or a report called Making Government an Even Better Place for Women to Work. And so it's full of data and insight. And what they basically said, in sum, is that public and social sectors lead the way in women's representation in entry and mid-level roles, right? So like interns, admin assistants, the dreaded secretary word. However, the public sector does a poor job of retaining these women and the ability to advance to higher roles. And what they found is it's due to things like workloads, the advancement opportunities in career development, lack of psychological safety, for example. And those are just like the top 3 that I scanned through. And so some of the other observations, kind of to your point over here, ma'am, I didn't get your name. Nora. My name's Laura, so I'm glad I double checked because I was like, I'm not sure. Young women and the younger generation in general are extremely transparent about their intersectionalities. And that is a key insight to keep in mind, especially when compared to the older generations. And because the older generations, like we've talked about before, microaggressions, really thinking that women are just, here to get coffee or file something or type notes or take minutes and things like that, which I refuse to do now if I don't have to. But that is really a key finding that that the data shows the younger generation is completely different than any generation we've had in the past. So my recommendation to keeping and retaining, especially young women in the profession, is to really cultivate an environment and ecosystem for the next generation to thrive and support the intersectionalities. Have your employee resource groups. Take someone to the next ICMA conference. Introduce them to everyone you know. Invite someone to sit next to you at lunch. Say, I don't know you. Hey, I'm Laura from ICMA. Like, what keeps you up at night? Or, those strange shower thoughts when your brain just kind of drifts away. That is the best way, really, to make those connections, to be a joiner. Whoever got my snowball, that was my word, a joiner, right? To make those connections and have people join you in life. I think that just those small little things will just carry on a long way. Be that unexpected mentor as well. Just kind of plop in and make a difference.
I actually have a millennial who's my daughter, and she is a kick butt manager where she works in scientific research, and she and I have weekly conversations on the weekend. And she goes into great detail about the problems that she has with people of my generation in the workplace. And I flip it and say, well, here are some of the challenges that we have. But some of the insights that she's always giving me, which I keep to heart, I'll go through them super quickly. Commitment to diversity and inclusion. Without that, you're dead on the table. A clear development opportunities. Efficient time management. There's nothing worse that millennials hate than long rambling meetings that aren't going anywhere. Their well-being needs to be a priority for you. Invest in the latest technology. And that's where, unfortunately, local government kind of falls back. They're not terribly good at the latest technology. Rethinking the experience required in job listings. You don't all have to have a master's to do X, Y, and Z. Make the feedback a solid part of your strategy. If you're not giving them feedback, they need feedback, they're not going to stay. Stability and balance, which is an odd thing because they don't have a problem with leaving if they're not happy, but they also want stability where they're at. So that kind of combination. Collaboration and autonomy. They both want collaboration, but they also want autonomy to be able to do their own thing. They want your application to be streamlined, and if they can't do it in 5 minutes on their phone, they're not interested. So these long-winded application processes that we tend to have in local government are not very good. Work-life balance, of course, remote opportunities, but creative input. They want to have input and they feel they should have input. And that's why I said earlier, some of my best mentors are millennials because I sit and listen to them about what they're saying and I'm like, okay, this is where we need to be in the future. So even though I'm not one, I sure listen to them.
Thank you. All right. So I know there are some women in the audience. They are feeling like, I like my job, it's great, but I want to move up. I want to maybe get more pay, or maybe I want to get a more senior position. So I pose this question again to our panel. What advice do you have for women wanting to move up the ladder in their career?
I would say make sure your supervisor or boss knows you want to advance, and that you're having regular conversations with them about the types of projects you'd like to be involved in. Sometimes they're busy. Sometimes they're not even thinking that you might want to be at least in the room, and then you might want a real part of that project. So you have to make what you want out of that job known. And if you're not getting it, then you may have to move. You may have to move jobs because, you make those efforts, and if they're falling on deaf ears, and if your supervisor is not invested in your professional development, then you need to move to a place where someone is. And I think I think sometimes we tend to get very comfortable in a job, and all of a sudden we look back and went, oh my gosh, we're there 7 years, and what happened? So pay attention to your career. Make sure that you're looking, and you're always striving, you're always learning, you're always building your resume. And then if you're not getting what you need, look at other options, because it's a candidate's market out there. So there are jobs out there, and you'll find a better place where your talents will be more effectively utilized.
I say get out of your own way. Don't tell yourself, and this is what I told myself, oh, I'm not ready. What am I doing? Get out of your own way. You're never going to be what you consider as being ready, right? I told myself, well, you don't know enough about public works. I didn't have to. Oh, you don't know enough about CRAs. Okay, I know a little bit about everything now. And you're never going to know it all. So get out of your own way, put some pressure on yourselves, and pursue your goals. Find the mentors, the training opportunities. They exist. Get a join to somebody at the hip and just push yourself out of the way and push yourself forward.
Yeah, and here's a secret. When you see the manager or the assistant manager out with the public works people and they're all staring and looking into a hole, looking like they're doing important things, they're not. They're looking at a broken pipe with water coming out of it, and everyone's going, It's not rocket science. So if you feel like there's something you don't know a lot about, you'll get up to speed. And as a friend of mine who was applying to be a city manager, she was asked, what do you know about running a water plant? And she said, well, I didn't think you were hiring me to run the water plant. You're hiring me to hire someone to run the water plant. And she got the job. So, you have to be ready for some of those, and have in your own head what you know and how you're going to deal with what you don't know. Because as Treasa said, you're never going to know everything.
But also make sure you're doing your current job the very best that you can, because sometimes you will get people who are super ambitious, they want to move up, but it's hard for their managers to actually make that move because they're not doing their current job terribly well, either because they're not happy in it, fair enough, or because they're so anxious to get that move up that they just would rather focus on the move up rather than their own job. The best way of getting promotions is to not necessarily, you can advocate for yourself by hitting it out of the ballpark in whatever you're doing right now. And if your city or town does not have an annual career pathing conversation that's formalized, that you can sit down with your manager and HR or people in culture, get copies of what it is that you're talking about, you should, because that's it's super important.
My advice is 3 words. Do it scared. Do it scared. Hit submit on that application. Show up to your interview. Quit your job and move to another city. Whatever you need to do, it scared. Just do it. Yeah. If it scares the you-know-what out of you, then it's good. And to the male allies in this room, I see you. Thank you for being here today. And support the women in your organization to do it scared. That's for you too. So thank you.
Thank you, panel. So at this time, I would like to open it up. We don't have a lot of time, but we have enough time for a few questions. And if there's someone in the audience who would like to comment or provide some background on why they want to talk about the next gen or whatever, they can. Yes, of course.
So I have a comment as a resident pregnant lady. I feel like I should say something, and as a board member. we're all in this organization, we're all taking care of each other. So when people make those comments, or I like wit, and that's how I deal with it a lot, because I'm not going to be this broad feminist leading the march, but I'm going to have a sly comment back to you to let you know that we're not going to say that, and we're going to kind of redirect. So, we all have stories that a commissioner asked me, well, how much more weight are you going to gain?
Oh gosh. And how much are you going to gain?
How much more weight are you going to gain?
Okay.
Being able to have that vision, I just think it's a lot of pressure to be outward. And I'm actually not a super extroverted person, which is ironic, right? It wears me out. But I feel like the onus is we have to do it. So when we talk about the paid parental leave program, as a deputy city manager, I'm in a place of authority to do it. At my personal time in my life, it was self-serving. That's not something I'm even bringing forward at this point in time. But my male counterpart can bring that forward. At the last organization I was in, after the county, I was also pregnant with another. I only have three, right? I don't have But the county administrator, who was a male, put it forward. And, when I was in the review team or whatnot, I said, I don't really know if it's appropriate that I comment. And he was like, it absolutely is. But I needed his validation in front of peers to say, no, it still matters. This is not self-serving. Emily didn't come up with this because she's pregnant. So when we talk about what can we do and how can we be capable, male or female, we're maybe after childbearing years, kids with health or, I'm rambling now, but I was putting perspective on things that can help each other, because it's not a lot. I think my experience is not malicious. People are not saying oh, we don't want the working mom. They just don't know.
Right.
What it looks
So
like.
far removed from it, or you know what you want, or how long are you gonna work before this baby comes? You take off time before, people just don't know. So I think being a little bit more open and not defensive helps. And call me if you want to know about it.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
So you ended where I was about to go, about not being defensive. Great presentation, everyone. We love being in this forum where it's women supporting women and equal rights. But don't take it personal. That's just one of the comments that I wanted to get to, because as women in the industry goes, oftentimes what we're trying to make you feel alienated and feel like you're the oddball or something's wrong with you, or there's something wrong with you, or particularly you as pushing the issue that's not right until it comes from the child. The other thing that I was going to make a comment on that so women don't know it. I know when Treasa made that comment about, or someone made the comment about, not a woman director, but I hired a public works director. It's okay to not know about it. If you don't, you have that subject matter expert, or you hire that subject matter expert so that you can have that person. Now I'll tell you one of the things that I do as I'm a consistency manager, is making sure I go out in the field and get to know my guys and get to know the folks that are out there, so that they are comfortable talking with you, sharing the information with you, because they want to see you succeed in life, because now you have that relationship with them.
Thank you so much. Yes.
So I probably just wanted to offer a perspective on the question is going to be next year. I think part of the issue is that it's a male-dominated profession. So whether it's on the police or the fire or public works or utilities, a lot of the managers came out of the profession that's male-dominated. And even us as SCCMA as an organization, probably been around maybe 80 years. For the first 50 years, it's all male as presidents. And then they may have a female, and subsequent to that, they may have Pam or Joyce or Jill. So it's an emergent and an evolving thing, and I think that similar concern would be, where are our blacks, where are our Hispanics? And I think these things that we're talking should be every thing that, we offer programs and opportunities, and to the extent that you qualify to move forward. Individually, personally, we may be advocating the movement of women, as for us then to personally take that on as a mentorship, to mentor, train, and help female. But I think we have the same responsibility, whether it's an African American, whether it's a Hispanic. Because we need diversity. And you go to places like Tennessee that don't have any Africans or don't have any women. So I think as we're from South Florida, so we have a lot of what we traditionally call diversity, and I think we have that responsibility also. And then finally, I think the first time you thanked us guys for being here, and I thought it was a joke, but thanks again. While it's a joke, it appears that it's not a joke, it's probably nothing that you need to thank us. For me, I think it's a session on how to address the situation we advocate. It's not a women's thing. So I don't think the fact that we put things up here because it's a women thing. It's a leadership, it's an organizational thing, of which I'm part of trying to figure it out. So I don't think we need to thank me. So I wanted to just say that I know two people did, and I feel like I feel the same way about me. Thank you.
Yeah, we have time for one more. Yes.
So, similar question, I remember when I was 23, straight out of college, and going to a management position. And some of the, I'm going to say it honestly, greatest amount of help I got came from other women. I'm gonna be real.
Yes.
So, I just say, be kind and not catty.
Yeah.
Who did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are.
We don't know.
Yeah.
Let's be real.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it can be very cold, hard, radical. One person I thought, the person even hired me, I thought, this is great. She's been here for 25 years, she's been mentoring me. I didn't want the manager job. I was trying for somebody else who put me there. And all the hell, who does she think she is? She just got here. Just because she thinks my college has a degree. I've been here 30 years and I don't have it. That's how you think. Don't do that. Because retention is not going to be your friend or on your side if you do that. And I can say that was when I was going through 25 years, 2 masters and a doctorate later. It is still the same way.
Yeah.
It is still the same way. Preaching, sister. And it's not the men.
You're right.
One of the
Yep.
greatest fathers in, I call them fathers in the workplace. And we come from every age.
Same sex sabotage is real.
That's true.
You're absolutely right.
I'll
Thank
share
you.
that I have elected officials. We were one of the first all-black female commissions in the state of Florida, but they were challenging sometimes. We have one male on our dais right now, but I was acting city manager for like 6 or 7, 8 months or whatever it was, and a lot of people thought like it was a shoo-in because I had so many women on the board, but it was not. And they challenged me, they make me stronger. That's cool, but it was not a shoe-in. And sometimes we can be that crab in the bucket, and it's not cool. And we have to do better at empowering one another.
And so we've reached our time. Our panelists will probably be here for a few minutes after, and you can always come up and speak with them. At this time, I would like to give a big thank you to the women who made this possible, and that is Sarah Campbell, Rebecca Flora, and Sally Sherman. I want to thank FCCMA for agreeing to have this collaborative opportunity to focus on a women-focused session. And I want to thank all of you for participating and being a part. And at this time, please give a round of applause to our panel.